Today, we're continuing our series, Share Your Story. How many of you have enjoyed this series and hearing what people have faced in life? It's been life-giving for me, inspiring, challenging for me, and every week we're interviewing guests to the church or people in our congregation about their journey, about the obstacles they've faced, the victories they've celebrated in life. And today we're going to hear from Mark and April, who have an incredibly moving and life-changing story to share. There are those times in life when we are pushed to our limit. And we're thankful that there aren't many of those times. But those times do come. And the truth of the matter is, if you say, I don't know that time has come in my life, it's going to at some point. We all face experiences in life that push us to where we think, I don't know if I can make it through this. There are things that we fear. There are things that we would say, God forbid that would ever happen. But we go through those kinds of experiences in life. And when we do, we experience, and I've gone through a couple of these, I think, so far, you find that all of the resources you've relied on in the past just seem to not work. Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't know if I'm prepared. The things that I've relied on to get me through so far just don't seem to be working to get me through here. It's like our resources become exhausted and our typical MO just doesn't work anymore. And so during those times, we're thrown into this experience where we are unable to lean on our own understanding. The way that we used to, we just feel like, I don't have the answers I need for this. And we can identify with a scripture in Proverbs chapter 3. Every week we've looked at a scripture from Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. The author of Proverbs says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your path straight," or your path smooth. Now, Proverbs 3, 5 through 6 is one of those scriptures that gets misused a lot. And when it's misused, it's usually misused by pastors who essentially say, don't think, don't question me, and just do what you're told. You know what I'm saying? This is one of those scriptures where it's like, okay, if you're a really good Christian, you should unplug your brain and not think about anything. And, it's like, playing dice with life or something, and because you're not supposed to lean on your own understanding. But that's not exactly what this scripture means. The meaning is a lot deeper than that, and the meaning, honestly, is somewhat foreign to us in our Western, 21st century culture. There's a Jewish organization called Chabad. And Chabad is an organization that calls to Jews who are maybe nominal. Jews are not really practicing their faith and kind of calls them back to a dynamic expression of the Jewish faith. And there's a rabbi called Zvi Freeman, and I want you to listen to how he explains what this view of what it means to trust in the Lord. Okay, we think of God as a thing. This is going to get really deep, okay? You know that I can go straight up Nerdville, don't you? You already know that about me, so we're hopping on the train straight to Nerdville right now. This gets really deep. In our Western society, without even realizing it, we do this. We categorize life according to things, objects, things. And for us, God is a thing. Therefore, we ask the question, does God exist? Because a thing may exist or it may not exist. Are you with me so far? And so we think in terms of things. I have a house, I have a couple of cars, I have a job. They're all things, and God is a thing. Rabbi Freeman says that's not the Jewish conception of God, and of course Proverbs is ancient Jewish wisdom literature. And so he says this about God. The flow of being. Now you have found God. In fact, in Hebrew, that's his name. God's name is a series of 4 letters that express all forms of the verb of all verbs, the verb to be. Is, was, being, will be, about to be, causing to be, should be. All of these are in those 4 letters of God's name. As God told Moses when he asked for his name, remember the burning bush story? I will be that which I will be, or I am that I am, or I am. Those are different tenses of the verb to be. And the proof? We ask questions that make sense only in English, but in Hebrew are plainly absurd, such as, does God exist? In Hebrew, that's a tautology, somewhat the equivalent of saying, does existence exist? I wasn't lying when I said we were going to Nerville. So for the writer of Proverbs to say, trust in the Lord and lean not on your own understanding, is a statement that is way deeper than we catch when we read this in Proverbs. It means trust in the source of all reality. Trust in the source of existence and lean not on your own understanding. And then that will make your path smooth in life. When you think, I can't get through this, well, that trusting in the source of existence, in reality, will make your path smooth. So the rabbi says, God does not exist. God is existence. This is outside of our category of thinking. God is a verb. God is being in the form of being as a verb. God is happening right now. God is happening now. And now. And now. And now. And that, when I said now 4 times ago, that doesn't exist anymore. That's a thing in our minds. Although that memory of when I said now a few times ago, that doesn't exist. What exists is now. Everything else is a memory. It's a thing. It's a category in our heads. Everything that's ever happened before now it does not, are you with me? It doesn't exist. It's a memory in our minds. But now is, and now God, right now. And so if the author of Proverbs were writing this scripture, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, to us in our Western culture and having to translate this concept, when you face things, I've never faced anything like this before. And I know I can't lean on my own understanding anymore. I need something else here. He might be saying something like this. For a while in life, you can trust in things, in concepts in your mind, money, a sense of security, a sense of comfort that comes from illusory thinking. Well, that would never happen to me, or just some kind of thing that protects you from feeling the pain of a difficult experience. You can trust in things for a while. But there's going to be a time when you can no longer trust in things. Those things they're not adequate anymore. And in that time, you will realize that all you really have is right now. And right now. And right now. And if you can get to the place where you stop trusting in the things that aren't even real, they're just categories in your mind, they're not real, and you can live now, and you can experience now, because God is the source of now. God is now. You'll be able to make it through those things that you never thought you could make it through, that all the things, the categories did not prepare you to make it through, but living now and feeling life as it comes and experiencing life now, that is trusting in the Lord and leaning not on your own understanding. Because this is wisdom literature, the whole point is that's what it means to live well. Does that resonate with you and your spirit? That there's just something about that that's true. We have all these things, but if we can just live right now, that's a completely new level of existence. Now, Mark and April were faced with an experience several years ago that the old glib answers just didn't work for anymore. And they were forced to examine life and answers and look at life in a new way. I had the privilege of talking with them a couple of weeks ago about their story. And I'm so looking forward to what they have to share today. I'm going to give them the proper introduction. Mark and April Joy have been a part of One Church for the past year or more and became participating members this past spring. They have 3 children, and they have a very powerful story to share. So let's give a very warm welcome right now to Mark and April. Come on up. There we go. Mark, there you go. Thank you for being willing to share your story with us. And like I've said every week, I had to kind of twist some arms at times, because nobody wants to come up. Everybody thinks, well, I don't know what to share, and everybody's humble about it. But I know your story really is powerful, and I really thank you for being willing to share with us. So, like every week, I'm just going to kind of toss those big, open-ended, vague questions, and let you share from the heart. And already you've touched my heart, And the same thing is going to happen here today. So what if we start back before the event happened? And what was your spiritual and religious background like prior to 2008?
So I had grown up in a Lutheran church and gone through confirmation and all of that, so it was fairly conservative, structured church setting. And then April and I had gotten married, and things were different because she had grown up in a different environment.
And pass.
Before I met Mark, my life was, we went to church. We went to lots of different churches. But I kind of was living by the seat of my pants all the time. I kind of was exploring things about religion, but not really too interested. When I met Mark, he was like straight and narrow, had it all together, and my life was always like, woo, up and down. So it was a nice thing for me to meet him. And then we started going to church, and I just started thinking, wow, I just need to start doing all these church things, and my life's so much easier. It's just, I'm really good, I pray, and I do all these things, and my life is great. So
okay.
That's where we were, kind of.
Yeah, and then what happened? We'll just dive in. Okay. What happened in the spring of 2008?
We, things were going along, and our daughter Bella had kind of been sick and wasn't really getting better, and so April took her into the doctor, and they had called later that night and said, well, we got some results, and April was at a Seder meal at the church, and so I was home with the kids, and they said, well, they haven't got them all back, but would you be able to take her into a hematologist tomorrow? Sure. And then they called back about an hour later and said, could you bring her in tonight? So the doctor called me from the hospital, and we were in a small town in Montana, and the hospital is about 30 minutes away. Says, call me when you're leaving, and I will meet you there.
Wow.
And then we'll either fly her out to Spokane, if you're in western Montana tonight, or if we need to wait, we'll wait and go in the morning.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the shock and whirlwind of being thrown into,
yes.
like, okay, I guess we're going to figure out what this is. And so she was diagnosed with leukemia, and the next day April and Bella were on a plane to Spokane because the weather was too rough to take the helicopter. So they flew, and then I drove over and began our journey through treatment.
Yeah. So Bella was diagnosed with leukemia, and then what was the next year like? These are huge questions in your life. What was that experience like?
I think just wondering, like, first you go through, well, why? Okay, she's sick. What do? We got to get all this help. And then you're like, well, then you start thinking, it starts sinking in, like, did I do something? Should I, is God mad at me? These questions that no, God loves us. He cares for us. But in the back of your head, sometimes you think, what did I do?
Right.
And I don't know, it was just I started looking at a lot of different things in religion, because I started getting a lot of platitudes, like people saying, oh, God has a plan for this, there's a reason. And I'm thinking, what is that reason?
Right.
So you start digging into what you know about God a little bit through this journey.
So you were instantly launched into these questions of faith.
Oh, for sure.
From the experience of the faith experience you were having at that time.
Right.
Correct. Okay. Yes. And what was the actual treatment process like, and on her and on you as a family as well? All this was going on at the same time. I know, the treatment and the questions.
Right. So the first month we were there, and she was in the hospital. So all the time in the hospital, and we were both there for a little bit. We had somebody watching the boys, and they would come over, some, and then we were wanting to try to keep some sense of normalcy a little bit while this was all going on. So one of us would stay for a week, and then we kind of went back and forth a little bit there. And then she was able to get out of the hospital and go home for a little bit. And we were only home for about a week, and then she started running a fever, which they said, well, that sometimes can happen. And so then we're back in the hospital, and then we were back in Spokane for another week. And then, everything was still progressing okay, but it's, there's still some uncertainties. And then we had, a little bit of time in the summer where she had to go back every week or every other week for about a month, and then at another round of intense treatment for 2 months. And she didn't have to be in the hospital, but we couldn't leave the area because when you're in treatment, you don't have an immune system. So you have to be within an hour of the hospital.
Yeah. And how far did you live away?
We were about 3.5 hours away.
So your lives were uprooted. So you had to spend, you would trade, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So for that, then that rest of that time, we were going back and forth. Each week, usually one of us staying and one of us going back home, and staying at the Ronald McDonald House, and which is great. And there's all kinds of stories about that, but we don't need to go into all the little stories. Yeah. So it was a kind of a big upheaval of back and forth, and we're seeing each other on weekends as we pass.
Yeah. And going to the Ronald McDonald House, remember you mentioned you had these questions that were starting to come up in your church experience from the church community. And then you saw some other families in the Ronald McDonald House and learned about those experiences. How did that affect the questions you were asking at that time?
I think things were going well with Bella. She had responded well to treatment and, progressing as, the doctors would like to see them. And, so you're around a lot of other patients.
Donna. Which one of you is doing that? I want to know. Okay, let's try again.
So you're around a lot of different patients, both in the hospital when you're there for your her getting treatment, or you're back at the Ronald McDonald House. And you see where things aren't going well.
Yes.
And you start talking to people about, their experience, and, when outlooks don't look good, and they start, they kind of talking about, well, they had the quality of life conversation with the doctor about their child, and, and you start to think, so, okay, when we knew there's a lot of support from family and community, with our church and just the community at large, people praying for us and for Bella, and then you think, I know that there's other people praying for all these other kids too that aren't recovering and aren't doing well, and so those things have kind of the platitudes that you always hear about. Prayer is working. It's like, but you see that it's not in places. Yeah,
it's not working in the ways that those people have been led to believe it should.
Right.
So you had your own questions when Bella was first diagnosed about, God, did I do something to deserve this somehow, right? Those are just some of the questions that can come up from our religious backgrounds. But then you met other families who and her treatment was going well, but their treatment wasn't necessarily.
And one I think I shared with you when we were talking, the family that we had met, and their son this was his second time through treatment. And he seemed like he was going well this time, and she was convinced that he was going to be the miracle, and then he wasn't. So those things are hard.
When we met, you said you met these families, and you were, not only were you going through your own experience, but you were entering into their experience as well. And what happened in that time to your faith, to your conception of God and life? What were some of the things you started thinking and going through in that time?
Well, I think you do start to look at things in life differently. And what are we really about as a community in church when, you see people struggling, and whether, they are there taking care of their child, and then they lose their job because they can't, they have to be there.
Yeah.
So I think in some ways, a lot of, I think my view, and this doesn't really spiritual, and I guess in a way, is kind of like, are we taking care of people? You see where, as a society that, yeah, we kind of do, but not really. Do we really care about people?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think some of that, you start thinking about those areas and how that affects you spiritually. And, in the James intro, I think, touches on that. Do we really care? And where do we see it, and are we seeing it? And I think for us, we saw a lot of care from our church family and from our community, and and even places we didn't expect.
Yeah. April, would you mind sharing about some of the questions that you went through as well? And Ed, if you wouldn't mind, there's a package of tissues somewhere, I think, in the coffee cart. Would you mind running those up to me, please? Thank you so much. I'm sorry. Would you mind sharing about some of your own faith journey during that time? Thank you, sir. Yeah.
I think part of what I started looking at, well, I was a youth pastor around that time. I helped with youth, and then I became more in charge of it later. But so I was always digging. I'm like, there's got to be something more than just God, this genie that we talk to. He gives us stuff, and us receiving good things when we're good and bad and that kind of stuff. So I started to look at some theological things, reading stuff, because I felt like people were saying, I always felt like I had to put on we're doing good, we're doing good, we're doing good. I always felt like I had to do that with my friends and my Christian family, like, yeah, everything's good. Then there's some places I got to thinking about, it isn't good, it's really hard, and I'm hurting. And I started looking more at, there were some authors that I was looking at, and I read this one thing about how God is in our suffering with us. And I knew that God loved us and cared for us, but I thought, God is really in our suffering with us. That's an amazing thing. And I was like, okay, that's a little different. And he's not about rewarding us and giving us stuff all the time. It's about being with us, being part of our lives, in our hurts, in our good things, and he's about life and not hurting us and not rewarding us that way. So I was looking at a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And then we also had some good things come about that weren't out of our Christian faith, family.
Mm-hmm.
Bella and I were reading this book before she got sick about a therapy dog that went around to hospitals and cared for people, and this man and his dog would do that. And before she got sick, she said, "Do you think we could get one of these dogs and do this?" And I'm like, "Sure, that sounds great," And so he had all these books, and some of them were children's books, and some of them one was more of an adult book too. But when she got sick, my friend remembered us talking about that, and so she contacted the author of those books. And he was living in Montana at the time, in Flathead area, and when she told him about Bella, he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to try to go to Spokane, and I'll bring my dog, and we'll see if we can get in there." And at first it was kind of hard he's been into a lot of hospitals, and he pulled some strings that way, but they were like, she was really neutropenic then, so being around things, she'd get sick really easy. And she was getting ready to go in for a surgery at that time, and the doctor finally said, "Yes, let's just let this happen. It will be a good thing for her." Mm-hmm. And so we started a relationship with this man. His name is Barry, and his dog, his name is Moritz, and it was a very healing thing for our family. And we met with him off and on and throughout her treatment, and more conversations we had with him. He was Buddhist, and he shared some things about who he was in that. And suffering, Buddhists and suffering have a lot of things that they can share and open up with you, so that was nice. And they were some really healing things for me, and I think for our family. So that created another bigger question of God can move through through different people who aren't just in this Christian faith. So it kind of started expanding my view and thoughts of, well, how can that be, So you start investigating those things more.
Yeah. How did you talked a little bit about reading some authors. How did you investigate? What are some of what was that journey like, and going from, a background where we can kind of feel like, it's transactional. If I'm a good person, then good things happen to me. It's like, God, I never watched Terminator, so good things are going to happen to me. I don't watch R-rated movies, right? We get this idea from some, branches of faith to now there's a Buddhist author with a therapy dog, and those old answers just don't work anymore. What were some of the things you came to? Do you care to share about that a little bit?
I just saw that God is a lot bigger than what I thought he was.
Yeah.
That he is always moving, and like you were saying earlier, in the now. He can kind of do whatever he wants, be wherever he wants to be, and I don't know. It's kind of freeing in some ways to know that he's bigger than what I've created him to be.
Even in pain, as you said earlier, even in suffering, that God is somehow
that God
there.
Could be in our suffering. Yeah, for sure.
It's excellent. And Barry, is he still connected? How did that turn out?
You need to talk more.
So so we kept in touch with him, like April said, and we had gone to see him, and he had come down and saw us, and he had asked us. He was writing another book of stories about his dog, and he wanted to know if he could put Bella's story in there, and so we said yes, and so she's in a book, and I can't read the story. I can't make it all the way through.
Yeah.
I think I did once, but since then, no. But it's just an amazing thing. And, so we had kind of kept in touch, and he had since moved from Montana, and we've heard from him a few times. We haven't heard from him in a little while. But, it was just, it was interesting, being with him, just a very humble, caring, loving person.
Yeah.
And, just had a huge heart for helping people. And that's what he wanted to do. And that's what he did with his, with his dog and just his life.
Yeah, it's excellent. So you're going through this treatment process with Bella. How did it affect changing gears a little bit, how did it affect your marriage, your parenting? You have 2 other boys at the time. What were some of the ways that you got through that as a family and as a married couple?
How did we get through it? I don't know. I think we were, you think about, people say, I don't know how you do it. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm doing it either. I just am. I know we still love each other, and we love our kids, and we want to try to keep some things going. And we knew that we wanted to, the boys to be able to express themselves. And, if it wasn't with us, and we had taken him to see a grief counselor. So if there was,
that's great.
And one of the things he had said when we had met with him, he's like, grief isn't it's about loss, and they've lost some of the innocence of childhood, and everybody's kind of loses things in this process, and that was interesting because I'd never really thought of it that way before. With talking about grief, I'd always kind of associated it with death and not just loss.
Mm-hmm. Bella was still there, but they lost some experiences of childhood through this.
And just I think some of that carefree innocence attitude you have as a child. I think that nothing bad's ever going to happen until it does. So that I think that was good, but we tried to include things that we just normally do, and it was still a process. So, even after she was out of the hospital the second time, it was every month for another year and a half back for more treatment.
Wow.
It's just kind of a long process, trying at times. But I think, we'd figured out whether consciously or unconsciously, how to do that together. Whether it was, okay, I'm going to Spokane this time, or, you went last time, I'm going this time. I think we got through it because we shared that burden. We went through it together. Was probably, if I had to look back on it, is probably how we made it through that. And, with support from family and friends too. We had friends in Spokane that during that time that we had met in Arizona 15 years before and had kind of kept in touch with, and they had just moved back there. So
Oh, wow.
that was kind of a great connecting, kind of reconnecting with them, old friends, yet, kind of growing through that together as well, being able to see them and spend time and having that support while we had to be there, even if it's just an overnight, for that year and a half that we were back and forth there.
Yeah.
It was good.
You shared responsibility, tried to keep things normal for the boys, relied on friends. So, big question, how is Bella now?
She's great. So, we think she's great. She doesn't really like to talk about it,
Yeah.
But she had her last appointment, so 5 years off treatment this last spring, and so that's the, what they say according to the treatment plan, the defining cured, moment.
That's great.
So that was this last spring. So
Yeah.
cured.
Yeah.
There's, I guess, and I had mentioned before, there's always some, not always, but every once in a while, some uncertainty that, just because of the amount of treatment that they go through, there can, they say, well, there could be long-term side effects. They don't really know. But, so far, everything's gone well, and she's been doing well.
Yeah. Well, final question. How did that experience affect your view of life and stress and things you fear, and lots of people fear about life and get stressed out about? What's the new normal after going through an experience like that?
I think it's, in some ways, the things that you thought were really big stressors. Like just at work the other day, some people were stressing out, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is not stressful. We can fix this. This is easy. Let's get this done.
Right.
I think that you see things differently of, okay, things that used to be stressful that I would come upon, if you can fix it, yeah. If you can't, you still go through it and you do the best you can. You
Yeah.
know? I think it's just a different perspective of what stress can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When the printer's broken, it's just not stressful anymore. Yeah.
Go to the store.
Right.
Yeah, our first world problems really aren't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Things that you can, things that you have some control over aren't near as stressful as the things that you don't.
Yeah.
There's are things that are still stressful that you go through, but they have, you have different perspective.
Yeah. I deeply appreciate about both of you that you went through what is, for every parent, really the nightmare of nightmares. Not knowing how things are going to turn out, meeting the other families that you encountered. And you realized, and not everybody does realize this, as you know, you realized some of the old answers I received they're not working anymore. And you were willing to take life as it comes. And I think you did that for your boys as well as for Bella. I'm sure you spared them from things they'll never even know because you took good care of them during that time, because you were willing to be open and live life in the now. Does that make sense? I sense that in both of you. And the fact that you're able to sit in front of a congregation and share with smiles on your faces, and you've gotten to a place of a view of life where you encountered your Buddhist friend, where things are much bigger. Life is bigger now because of this experience. I think you have a life-giving, inspiring story to share with who knows how many people. So I really appreciate you doing this today.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Can we thank Mark and April today? Thank you so much. Thanks, Mark. So we have things that we rely on. There comes a time when we can no longer lean on those things. And we're faced with the question, can we trust in the Lord? Can we trust in existence and the ground of being and live life now and be open to living life now? The writer of Proverbs would say that's the key to getting through life with wisdom and living well. Can you trust in the Lord in now? I invite you to pray with me.